the gift of light.
Out of the darkness of the silent night came the gift of light. It had been getting colder and darker earlier each evening, and Ted pedaled his bicycle faster and faster to get himself warm. "You call that a bike?" Van Derk had goaded him as Ted loaded his papers outside of the laundromat. "I'll tell you what I call it." As Ted pulled away Van Derk's label, a rolling basket driven by an Igmo bounced around inside his head. What is an Igmo? Ted thought. Just as he threw his first newspaper, Ted's thoughts were broken by the sharp tone of authority, a call to heel that stopped his rolling basket in its tracks. "Young man," the voice admonished, "do you treat all your customers this way?" questioned the well-groomed petite lady as she pointed to a wet newspaper he had delivered the day before. It had been thrown against a bush a few feet away from the steps. Ted was speechless as Miss Condrey began to tell him precisely how her newspaper was to be delivered. "From this moment on, park your bike in the driveway and bring my paper up on the porch. Then place it in the large semicircular strap-like thingamybobs below the mailbox, which are obviously there to hold a newspaper." "Yes, ma'am," Ted said as he demonstrated his ability to comply with her request. "Thank you," Miss Condrey said in her well-rehearsed, school principal-like tone. The fact of the matter was that Ted had treated all his customers that way, but then all of Ted's old customers had been on the old shell road beside the tracks, as his sister called it. No one ever complained on that side of the tracks, and everyone had always been nice to Ted. Ted began to cuss old Burns for talking him into taking the new delivery route. "They pay better, and it's a chance to meet some of the movers and shakers of this town," Mr. Burns highlighted. It was his job to manage the newspaper boys. "Sounded good, Burnsy," Ted yelled to himself as he pedaled up to the next house and threw a rolled-up newspaper. "But let me tell you something, old buddy. These people are a mite tardy with the Christmas tips." Every year at Christmas time, Burns would sell all the newspaper boys 15-cent trinkets with the newspaper's logo on it for giveaways. "Oh, you hand your customer one of these measuring spoons and smile and say Merry Christmas, and you'll always get a buck or two tip," Burns would tell them. Well, that was true on Shell Road, Ted thought to himself, but these movers and shakers are cheap. Hand them a 15-cent spoon and they say thank you like they just sucked on a lemon and walk off. This time last year, Ted had over $100 in tips. That was one of the best parts of being a newspaper boy. What a difference a few blocks can make, Ted mused. Ted lived behind an old shopping center that was located at a crossroads where a once important pre-interstate highway ran east to west. In this small linear city, it was literally 2 blocks from the shopping center down a wide avenue where the stately houses backed up to the river. 2 blocks in the other direction, the road began to look like an industrial pike and ended in only a few more blocks where it stopped at the railroad tracks. From the tracks to the river, this part of the city was less than a mile wide. "Young man," said Miss Condrey a few days later as she opened the door. Ted bristled as he stopped on the porch, expecting another chewing out session. "If you have a moment to come inside, there's something I would like to show you." "What is your name, young man?" "Ted." "All right, Ted, nice to meet you. My name is Florence Condrey." She smiled as she held out her hand. I have a son who's now grown, but before he started lifting weights and eating peanuts by the peck, to steal a phrase, and of course guzzling that bloody beer, she paused to signal her displeasure by bringing her eyebrows down in unison. Well, he used to be quite a Beau Brummel. Do you know what that is? Is that like a singer in a band? Said Ted. Not exactly. It just means a man who is well dressed. Some of the stuff he wore I wouldn't wear to a costume ball, she laughed as she opened up the hall closet. But this blue blazer was made in New York by a top men's clothier of the finest cashmere wool blend, and I think it would fit you. I do not know if you know this, but a navy blazer is a classic, which simply means, Ted, that it never goes out of style. You can wear it casually with a golf shirt or dressed up with a tie. It is the most basic piece of a well-dressed man's wardrobe. Please try it on, Miss Condrey said. My son will never fit into it again, and I cannot stand the thought of it wasting away in the closet. Ted took off his coat and tried on the blazer. It fit him beautifully. He was stunned as he looked at himself in the mirror. Miss Condrey seemed very pleased that it fit him so perfectly. Would you please take it? I would be happy to know that someone is getting some use out of this. My husband ordered this especially from Nachman's department store for my son, but he only wore it a few times before his growing spurt, she said, and rolled her eyes as if letting Ted ever so slightly into her world. Ted said, "Thank you," as Miss Condrey put the jacket in a nice plastic cover with a zipper and a special hanger. Miss Condrey, thank you for this. I did not have a blazer, Ted said, then pushing his luck a little while letting Miss Condrey know he had been listening. More importantly, a navy blue one. I will put it to good use. Miss Condrey said not to consider the jacket a gift because it would eventually have been eaten by moths, but she would give him a gift in the form of an education, some instructions on how to take care of the jacket. She also wanted him to think about how it would make him feel special when he wore it. She explained that he should feel confident that he looked good when he wore a nice navy blazer. She said that should help him act in a confident manner and that people would respect his confidence. She ended with an uplifting, I trust that from this moment on you will always walk proudly in this or any other navy blue blazer. The next evening was Christmas Eve, and Ted put on his new jacket. He couldn't believe how light and warm it was. He checked himself out in the hall mirror and adjusted the lapels. He had decided to buy a present for Miss Condrey, so he went by her house to drop it off. Later, he went to church with his family, and his dad and mom kept saying how handsome he was and how he seemed to be growing into such a fine young man. But the best part of the evening was when he caught Betsy Mater giving him the eye before coming over and asking him if he would like to meet her at a party later. Wow, is it the blazer, he thought? Florence, how you doing? A familiar voice came from the steps. Oh, I'm fine, Smitty, Miss Condrey smiled. What you got there? Oh, it's a present from that fine young man who delivers the paper. Oh, yeah, the boy that you were complaining about last week? Well, things do change, don't they? I guess they do, but you keep calling me Smitty, just like your husband used to. My name is Herman Smith, and I've been your neighbor for 20 years. Couldn't you call me Herman? I guess I could. I guess I should, she replied in a somewhat curious tone. Well, since we've come that far, why don't you invite me in? Come on in, Herman. Herman moved cautiously as Florence invited him to come sit down and share a glass of wine. He had been waiting for this moment for years, and he chose his words carefully. Those were the days when we first moved in here. I thought the world of Mr. Condrey. You mean when you two weren't fighting? Florence, Herman semi-laughed as he threw his hands up in the air. Those weren't fights. Those were fun times. They were things that guys do. Florence seemed as if she was learning something new, but still had to cast some doubt on it with a smirk. Oh yeah, first he builds this stupid, oversized, glowing Santa Claus that everyone could see from the shopping center, and the next day you have to build a glowing, even bigger, sexy Miss Santa Claus right next to it. Where is that thing? I ought to find it and put it up this year, Herman laughed. Yeah, then you guys had to put the suggestive, alternating switches on them. One went off, then the other went on. Back and forth. People were lining up and walking down from the shopping center to see our houses. Florence was laughing and having fun like she hadn't in a long time. Do you think of Karen every day? Of course I do. We were married 27 years, but I'll tell you something else. I think of you every day, too. Miss Condrey's eyes began to light up as she reached for her words. Well, it's late. I'll walk you to the door. Look, Herman smiled as he slowed down in the foyer. You were right under the mistletoe. You can't blame this on me. Oh, I don't know what to say. As she spoke, Herman put a nice, not too passionate, but well-placed kiss right on her lips. They were both frozen in time for a few seconds before Miss Condrey announced, Herman, I'll see you later. Well, I've had enough excitement for one day. I think I need to go home and take my heart medicine, Herman said with a chuckle. The next day was a white Christmas of the worst kind. The snow was so thick and wet that it knocked out all the electricity, and the temperature was predicted to go down into the teens that night. Ted had the hardest delivery day of his career. He had to pile his papers on a sled and drag them from house to house. Then he had to take each newspaper up to the house and find a place to put it out of the weather. Miss Condrey was cleaning up from her grandchildren's visit. In spite of having no heat, she felt a warm glow considering her romantic encounter with Mr. Smith the night before, and she ached slightly because she was alone. Just then, she slipped on a marble that had been left on the floor by the Christmas tree. Oh, she cried as she went down. She knew something was broken, but she could not move. As she lay on the floor, seeing the last rays of the Christmas sunlight fade, she began to get very cold. Smitty, yelled old man Yates as Herman came in the back door of the restaurant. Come on in, old buddy. I hope you like candlelight dining. You know, every year I swear I'm going to buy a generator, but I never do. Yeah, I see you've got the gas grill smoking away out here. Where are the usual denizens of Nowhereville? Herman replied. Well, our old club is fading out, old pal. That idiot Russell got married, and you know that Joe took his exit from the world last spring. I had kind of forgotten about that, Herman mused. Still got the club name on the blackboard, NTGOCC. The Nowhere to Go on Christmas Club. It's great you feed the stragglers on Christmas, Yates. And free drinks, too, Donnie grinned. Just keep that front door locked, Yates signaled. This is our own little private party. After a few hours, Herman decided to head home. He enjoyed the company, especially in lieu of being alone when everybody else had something to do each year. But when the others start to slur White Christmas for the third time, he knew from experience it was time to book it. As Herman headed down the deserted, oversized avenue, he could see his and Miss Condrey's house sitting square at the end of the road. He walked down the middle of the road, enjoying the crunch of each boot as it pushed down on the crusty ice. The icy snow had made the world look like a different planet. Brutal, cold, and unforgiving, but at the same time gorgeously quiet and peaceful. He had a nice warm coat that he only wore 4 or 5 times a year. Whenever he wore it, It made him feel thankful that he owned it, and at the same time somewhat distressed. He always thought, there's probably some poor soul out here tonight that doesn't have a coat, much less a warm one. He walked toward where once he and Mr. Condrey had created a scene with their battling icons of flashing light. We even made the tacky Christmas tour a couple times, he laughed out loud to himself, and the best part was watching the wives complain about it. However, all was still this night. Herman paused by the driveway to look at Miss Condrey's house, as if some of the magic of last night would emanate out to him. A couple weeks later, the world was in a new year, though things seemed routine at the laundromat as Ted folded his papers. However, that would quickly change with a, "Hey guys, check this out." Van Dyke walked over to Mr. Burns' car and said with a smirk detectable only to the boys, "Hey, Mr. Burns, can I bum a cigarette?" Burns was happy to share a smoke with Van Dyke, even if by doing so he knew he was risking his job, but he saw it as gaining acceptance with the head of the newspaper boy gang. Van Dyke was about to pull off quite a demonstration. As he leaned up against the car and talked to Burns between stilted right-handed drags on his cigarette, he wrote "bald-headed rat" with an indelible marker on the side of Burns' white company car below the window. As the rest of the boys were cracking up, he calmly, coolly, and collectedly asked, "Are my pants falling down or something?" Marker back in his pocket, cigarette in his left hand where it belonged, Van Dyke killed his nail with a last hard draw, a quick flick, and a slow, deliberate squashing with his left boot. Mr. Burns drove off with his new label on public display. Ted was still laughing as he walked up to the porch. While he was putting the paper in the holder, Mr. Schmidt came out. "Hey, son, I'm Mr. Schmidt, and I live next door in the brick house." Ted had never seen Mr. Schmidt before because he was one of those people who like to buy their papers at the drugstore. "You know, son, you don't know it, but you've done something very special for someone I care about, and I personally want to thank you and let you know that if I can ever do anything for you, you just let me know." Ted was somewhat confused and didn't know how to respond. For a moment, he almost said, "If you don't mind, I would like to know what the definition of an IGMO is." But Ted decided against it. Maybe Van Dyke had made the word up. "Son, would you please come in? Miss Condrey would love to see you." "Hello, Miss Condrey. What happened to your leg?" "Well, I broke it Christmas Day, but thanks to you, I didn't freeze to death. I was laying there for hours in the cold, and I do not mind telling you I was very scared. I did not expect anyone to come around here for days, and I tried, but I could not get to my phone." Ted looked quite perplexed, as if to say, "What happened next?" "Well, I remembered your Christmas present. That great flashlight loaded with good, fresh batteries, I might add, lying right there under the tree. Well, I pointed it through the bay window and started clicking it on and clicking it off 3 times, then pausing and clicking it on and off 3 times again. I did that for several hours. I just came down the street and looked over at Florence's house, and I knew there was something wrong when I saw the light flashing on and off like that through the window," Herman proudly chimed in. "And bless his heart, he got the ambulance over here that night and has been taking good care of me ever since I came home from the hospital." "Well, I wanted to get you something useful," Ted said, as he beamed like a Boy Scout receiving a merit badge. Then in a tone half mocking Miss Condrey, he went on to tell her that it was made of high-grade aluminum with a scratch-proof lens, and the top screws on so tight that it's waterproof. Ted was clearly enjoying giving the lecture and finished off with, You know, safety never goes out of style, and you could just feel more confident when you know you've got a good, dependable flashlight around. Miss Condrey grinned as Herman rubbed her neck. "Ted," Miss Condrey said very sincerely, "even with the accident and the moment of fear that came with it, this was the best Christmas I have had since my husband passed away." Miss Condrey paused as if realizing something for the first time. She was thoroughly amused and in a half-laughing tone quipped, "I guess you could say that in more ways than one, I received the gift of light." While gesturing with upheld hands and using the posture he had gained from his many roles in the local theater group, Herman proclaimed, "Let's share the light inside us all." One silent night when everything outside was white, a night and time so far away, still remembered on this day, on this day. Inside the house, two hearts would glow, kissed beneath the mistletoe, and the present from the boy smiled upon just like a toy, like a toy. And out of the darkness of the silent night came the gift of light. The season calls to large and small to celebrate the trumpet's call. Pound the drums and deck the halls and share the light inside us all, inside us all. And out of the darkness of the silent night came the gift of light. And out of the darkness of the silent night came the gift of light. The gift of light. The gift of light.
The end. This song story is available for download on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. Songs and stories written and performed by George Wythe Wayne. All rights reserved. Writing River Publishing, 2022.